Have you ever arrived home after like a really long drive, pulled into your driveway, put the car in park, and suddenly realized you have absolutely zero memory of the last 20 minutes of the commute?
Oh, that is such a terrifying feeling.
Right. It's so unsettling. Or maybe you're just sitting at your desk, minding your own business, and that intense, inescapable mid-afternoon slump hits you like a physical wall.
Yeah, completely draining your energy, regardless of how much coffee you pour into your system.
Exactly. You know exactly the feeling I'm talking about. And today, we're going to unpack exactly why those things happen.
It is an incredibly common experience, but understanding the biology behind it is, well, it's pretty mind-blowing.
It really is. For this deep dive, we are looking at section 4.1 of chapter 4 from Psychology 2E, and our mission today is to decode the actual science of consciousness.
We're going to map out the internal biological clocks that are literally ticking away inside our brains right now.
Yeah, and uncover the very real physical consequences of ignoring what our bodies are desperately trying to tell us about sleep.
And given the wealth of biological and psychological mechanisms in this text, it helps to frame how we navigate it. Since we are diving into a psychology textbook, I am happy to take on the role of the lecturer today to synthesize the biology and anatomy for you.
Perfect, and I will happily play the student. I've got a lot of questions. I want to challenge some of these concepts, and my main goal is to make sure we're hitting the core takeaways for you, the listener.
Sounds like a plan.
Because, I mean, the idea that my brain just unplugs while I'm driving definitely demands an explanation.
Oh, yeah.
So to start us off, before we get into losing sleep or feeling exhausted,
Right,
we need a baseline.
right.
What does it actually mean biologically to be awake?
So the textbook defines consciousness simply as our awareness of both internal and external stimuli.
Internal meaning, like inside my body.
Exactly. Internal stimuli include things like feeling physical pain, recognizing hunger, thirst, sensing sleepiness, or, even just being aware of your own ongoing thoughts and emotions.
Okay, got it. And
External stimuli are your environmental inputs. Seeing the sunlight through a window, feeling the ambient warmth of a room, or hearing a voice.
so consciousness isn't just about perceiving the outside world. It's equally about noticing the internal dashboard of my own body.
He's spot on.
But if I'm highly aware of both, I'm fully awake. I know it's not just an on and off switch, so I don't just go from 100% conscious to zero the moment I close my eyes.
No, not at all. It is entirely a continuum. Consciousness ranges from full, hyper-focused awareness all the way down to the deepest stages of sleep.
Right.
And sleep itself is a distinct state marked by relatively low levels of physical activity and significantly reduced sensory awareness. It is fundamentally different from just resting your eyes while awake on the couch.
Well, let's apply this continuum to that driving scenario from the beginning. Because if I'm awake and my hands are on the steering wheel and my foot is managing the pedals,
You're doing a lot of active processing.
yeah, my brain is processing a massive amount of data. But if my primary stream of thought is totally zoned out, thinking about what I'm going to cook for dinner, where does that fall on the continuum? Am I in some hybrid state of consciousness?
The text categorizes that specific experience as daydreaming, which occupies a lowered state on the continuum of consciousness.
Lowered state. Okay.
Yeah, you are experiencing a state of reduced sensory awareness regarding your immediate environment. You are technically awake, and your motor cortex and visual processing centers are fully capable of engaging in the complex tasks required to operate the vehicle.
Because I'm not crashing the car.
Right. Your brain is tracking the lanes and the cars around you. However, your primary conscious awareness, your active attention, is entirely disconnected from those actions.
It's like my brain has a background app quietly running the car, while my main screen is completely monopolized by my dinner plans.
That is a great analogy.
I mean, it feels efficient, but also inherently risky if something unexpected happens on the road.
Oh, absolutely. Your reaction time in that daydreaming state is certainly compromised because your active attention has to snap back to the immediate environment. And like so much of our psychological behavior, these shifting states of processing and awareness are dictated by deep-rooted biological mechanisms.
Okay, so if consciousness is a continuum that we slide up and down, what is the mechanism physically moving us along that slider?
We have to look at biological rhythms.
Rhythms, like a pulse.
Sort of. These are internal rhythms of biological activity that govern our bodies. A widely recognized example is a woman's menstrual cycle, a recurring pattern that takes about 28 days to complete.
Okay, sure.
But the rhythms dictating our consciousness operate on a much tighter schedule. We call them circadian rhythms.
Circadian rhythms, right. That's a phrase people use all the time, usually to excuse why they are so tired on a Monday morning.
Yeah, they get blamed a lot. A circadian rhythm is specifically a biological cycle that takes place over a period of about 24 hours. Our sleep-wake cycle is the most prominent one, and it is intrinsically linked to our environment's natural light-dark cycle.
So it's tied to the sun.
Exactly. But the cycle governs far more than just when we close our eyes. Our bodies experience daily, predictable fluctuations in heart rate, blood pressure, and blood sugar.
Wait, really? All of those systems are running on a synchronized 24-hour timer? I always assumed blood pressure just reacted to whatever stress I was dealing with in the moment.
Well, stress causes acute spikes, certainly, but the baseline is cyclical. Section 4.1 highlights how even your core body temperature fluctuates systematically over a 24-hour period.
It does.
Yes, your temperature steadily rises throughout your waking day, peaking in the afternoon, and then it steadily falls as you enter sleep. The absolute lowest point of your body temperature occurs during the very early morning hours. Alertness is directly associated with higher body temperatures, and sleepiness is associated with lower body temperature.
Wait. If alertness is tied to higher body temperatures and my temperature peaks in the afternoon, why is the mid-afternoon slump such a universal phenomenon? Shouldn't I be at my most alert?
It does seem contradictory on the surface. While the broader core temperature is high, biological rhythms are complex. The afternoon often involves a slight temporary dip in alertness as part of the body's natural circadian oscillation.
Ah, so it's a built-in dip.
Yeah, and it's sometimes exacerbated by digesting a large lunch before rallying again into the early evening. The overarching rule, however, remains that the steep drop in temperature at night is a primary signal for sleep initiation.
Okay, so if my body's meticulously managing all these 24-hour schedules, coordinating temperature, heart rate, sleepiness, there has to be a master conductor. Where is the actual physical clock located inside my body?
So, the main center for homeostasis, which is the biological tendency to maintain an optimal balance within a system, is the hypothalamus.
The hypothalamus. Okay, I remember that from high school biology.
Right. It's a region of the brain situated just above the pituitary gland. And nested right inside the hypothalamus is your brain's master clock mechanism, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or the SCN.
The suprachiasmatic nucleus. Wow, that is a mouthful. Let's just stick with SCN.
Probably a good idea.
How does this cluster of cells in the middle of my brain actually keep time? I mean, it's not like it has a digital readout.
No, it uses the most reliable metronome available on Earth, the sun.
Really?
Yeah. The axons of specialized light-sensitive neurons located in your retina provide information directly to the SCN.
Hold on. My eye has a direct line to the brain just for light, bypassing actual visual processing.
Exactly. It is essentially a dedicated environmental light meter. These specific neurons aren't there to help you read a book or recognize a face.
So what do they do?
Their whole job is to measure the amount of light present in your environment and transmit that data straight to the SCN. This mechanism is how your internal biological clock continuously synchronizes itself with the outside world.
That is fascinating. The SCN is sitting in the dark center of my brain, using like a fiber optic cable attached to my eye to monitor the sun.
That's a very accurate way to picture it.
But, you know, a light meter can't physically knock me out.
Yeah.
How does that electrical signal from the retina translate into a chemical that actually makes me drowsy?
Well, once the SCN processes that the light levels are dropping, it communicates with another endocrine structure located inside the brain called the pineal gland.
Okay, the pineal glands.
The pineal gland is responsible for releasing the hormone melatonin, which is one of the most important regulators of the sleep-wake cycle.
Okay, so melatonin is the chemical messenger. Sun goes down, the retina tells the SCN signals the pineal gland, and the melatonin starts flowing into my system.
Exactly. Melatonin release is aggressively stimulated by darkness and actively inhibited by light. It serves as a systemic signal to the rest of the body that it is time to initiate the biological winding down process.
That makes total sense.
And the textbook notes another critical function here. The pineal gland and its regulation of sleep is thought to be deeply involved in regulating our immune system as well. Sleep is not merely rest, it is active physiological maintenance.
I do struggle with this one-size-fits-all biological rule, though.
How so?
Well, if we all have the same basic hardware, the retina, the SCN, the pineal gland, and we are all living under the exact same sun, why am I naturally a night owl?
Ah.
Like, I don't suddenly get exhausted at 7 p.m. when the sun sets in the winter. Meanwhile, I have friends who are naturally waking up at 5 a.m. like morning larks. Does that mean my SCN is just broken?
No, no, your SCN is functioning perfectly. The textbook addresses this directly by explaining that while the core mechanism is universal, there are significant individual differences in sleep regulation.
Sleep regulation. Oh,
Yeah, which refers to the brain's specific control over switching between sleep and wakefulness and how it coordinates that cycle with the outside world. These profound individual differences in our natural circadian patterns are known as a person's chronotype.
chronotypes. So chronotypes are a built-in variation.
Yes, exactly.
From an evolutionary perspective, that actually makes perfect sense. If you have a whole tribe of early humans, you don't want every single person passing out the moment the sun goes down.
Right, that would be dangerous.
Exactly. Having some genetic variation where night owls stay alert later and morning larks wake up before dawn means someone is always awake to keep watch over the group.
It is a highly advantageous evolutionary adaptation for a social species. Research clearly demonstrates that morning larks and night owls genuinely differ with regard to their biological sleep regulation.
So it's not just a preference.
No, it is not a matter of laziness or willpower. It is a fundamental variation in how their SCN interprets and applies the environmental light data.
Which brings us to a massive modern problem. Our chronotypes and our SCN evolved over millions of years to be intimately tied to the natural light-dark cycle of the planet. But we don't live in a state of nature anymore.
No, we certainly do not.
We live in a 24/7 society. What happens to the body when we force our ancient biological clocks to break those environmental rules?
The circadian clock becomes violently out of synchrony with the external environment. The most universally understood example is traveling across multiple time zones, which results in jet lag.
Oh man, jet lag. It isn't just feeling a little sleepy. It feels like a systemic illness. Like your stomach feels wrong, your brain is foggy, you feel physically weak.
That's because every organ in your body is receiving conflicting signals. The textbook lists the clinical symptoms of jet lag as profound fatigue, sluggishness, severe irritability, and insomnia.
Insomnia, meaning you just can't sleep even though you're tired.
Right. Insomnia is defined here as experiencing a consistent difficulty in falling or staying asleep for at least 3 nights a week over a month's time. But an even more insidious disruption comes from rotating shift work.
Rotating shift work. To be clear, that's not just someone who permanently works the night shift. It's someone whose schedule is constantly bouncing around.
Exactly. It's a work schedule that constantly changes from early to late on a daily or weekly basis. Imagine working 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Monday, then 3 a.m. to 11 a.m. on Wednesday, then 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. on Friday.
The SCN would never be able to catch up. It takes time for the body to adjust to a new time zone, so constantly shifting your waking hours means you are essentially living in a state of perpetual, never-ending jet lag.
The normal circadian rhythm is completely shattered. This chaotic schedule leads to severe chronic sleeping problems and is heavily linked to signs of depression and anxiety.
That's awful.
It is. It's incredibly common in vital healthcare professions and service industries. It creates persistent exhaustion and agitation, which tragically makes workers significantly more prone to making dangerous mistakes on the job.
There is a detail in Section 4.1 regarding shift work that we have to talk about. It wasn't just a chart of hormonal levels. It was a qualitative study looking at the real-life experiences of middle-aged nurses who worked these rotating shifts.
Yes.
The researchers, West, Botten, and Burns, interviewed them, and it was deeply humanizing.
The psychological toll of that exhaustion is immense. What part of the study stood out to you?
Well, one of the nurses talked about how the biological exhaustion completely eroded her family relationships. She said, I'm quoting here, "If you had a partner who does work, regular job, 9 to 5 office hours,
Yeah.
the ability to spend good time with them when you're not feeling absolutely exhausted, that would be one of the problems that I've encountered," end quote. Yeah. We can talk about light receptors and the hypothalamus all day, but the real-world application is a person who is simply too biologically depleted to actively participate in their own relationship. The broken biology directly dictates their social reality.
It frames the severity of the issue perfectly. When your biological clock is misaligned, the damage isn't just cellular, it cascades into your emotional and interpersonal life.
If someone listening is trapped in a rotating shift work schedule, are they just doomed to this broken biology? Is there any way to artificially manage the SCN?
Well, there is a biological workaround, and it utilizes the exact mechanism the SCN relies on: light exposure.
Light therapy.
Yes, since the biological clock is entirely driven by light, individuals can use targeted bright light therapy during their working shifts to simulate daytime and strictly ensure dark exposure when they are not working, even if it's noon outside.
Oh, I see.
By heavily controlling the light input, they can manually realign the biological clock with their required schedule. Research shows this effectively combats insomnia and alleviates symptoms of anxiety and depression associated with both shift work and severe jet lag.
So you are basically hacking the retina. You provide the eye with the environmental cues it needs to regulate melatonin appropriately, faking the sun to trick the brain into compliance.
Hacking the retina, yes, it is a necessary intervention for an unnatural environment.
Let's be honest, though. You don't have to be a night shift nurse or constantly fly across the globe to mess up your sleep. Everyday modern life has created a chronic baseline issue for almost everyone. People stay up until 2 a.m. scrolling on their phones and then force themselves awake at 6 a.m. for work.
The textbook refers to this widespread phenomenon as sleep debt.
Sleep debt sounds like financial ruin, but for your nervous system.
That's a good way to put it. A person with a sleep debt does not get sufficient sleep on a chronic basis. And historically, we can trace this epidemic back to a specific technological advancement.
Let me guess. The advent of electric light.
You got it.
Because we suddenly gained the power to turn on the sun at midnight.
Exactly. We removed the environmental constraint that forced early humans to sleep. While we welcome the incredible convenience of lighting up the darkness, we suffer massive biological consequences. We are significantly more active during the nighttime hours than our ancestors were.
And so we sleep less.
Right. Consequently, the textbook points out that a vast majority of adults now sleep less than 7 to 8 hours a night, continually accruing this physiological debt.
How much sleep does the body actually require to maintain homeostasis, though? Does that number change as we age?
It varies tremendously across the human lifespan. The National Sleep Foundation updated their guidelines in 2015 to account for these shifts. Newborns require an immense amount of sleep, between 12 and 18 hours a night, to support rapid neurological development.
Wow, 18 hours.
Yeah. By the time we reach adulthood, the recommended amount stabilizes to 7 to 9 hours.
Okay, that sounds manageable.
But interestingly, a meta-analysis cited in the text indicates that as we continue to age, our sleep duration decreases. By the time we are 65 years old, individuals average fewer than 7 hours of sleep per day.
I guarantee there is a listener right now wondering if they're just having a slow Tuesday or if they're actually carrying a massive chronic sleep debt. Is there a way to measure it? How do you know if your body is deeply in the red?
The textbook offers a surprisingly simple litmus test. If you lie down to take a nap during the day and you fall asleep very easily, you almost certainly have a significant sleep debt.
Wait, falling asleep instantly is a bad thing. People always brag about that. Like, I'm such a good sleeper, my head hit the pillow and I'm out in 10 seconds.
It is a huge misconception. Falling asleep instantaneously is a stark biological red flag.
Seriously?
Yes, it indicates chronic deprivation. The body's so desperate for restorative rest that it skips the normal, gradual slide down the continuum of consciousness and immediately initiates a shutdown. The text specifically highlights college students as being notorious for suffering from significant sleep debt, often masking their exhaustion with high caffeine intake.
So let's map out the actual consequences of carrying that debt. Decreased levels of alertness, decreased mental efficiency. Those sound like frustrating inconveniences that just make work harder.
Yeah.
But is sleep debt truly dangerous to the physical body?
It is systemically toxic. Accumulating sleep debt physically degrades the human body over time. Figure 4.5 in the textbook maps out the cascade of failures across the body's systems.
What kind of failures?
Well, chronic sleep deprivation triggers an increase in circulating stress hormones. This directly contributes to increased blood pressure, which strains the cardiovascular system, drastically raising the risk of heart disease. Furthermore, the metabolic disruption leads to much higher risk of obesity and type 2 diabetes.
And earlier we mentioned the pineal gland's connection to the immune system. So if you weren't sleeping, you weren't fighting off illness either.
Exactly. Your immune function is severely reduced, leaving you vulnerable to basic infections. But the physical toll is only half the picture. The cognitive degradation is where sleep deprivation becomes immediately dangerous.
Dangerous how?
Section 4.1 presents a staggering comparison. Sleep deprivation affects cognitive and motor function as much as, if not more than, alcohol intoxication.
More than alcohol.
Huh.
So someone getting behind the wheel of a car after pulling an all-nighter is functionally identical to a drunk driver.
Biologically and functionally, the impairment is remarkably similar. Research demonstrates that with fewer than 4 hours of sleep, individuals suffer severe impairments in cognitive and moral judgment. They become irritable, highly distractible, and lose their ability to assess risk.
And if 4 hours destroys your judgment, what happens when people push it even further?
The most severe psychological effects occur when a person stays awake for extended periods. If an individual remains awake for 48 consecutive hours, they can actually begin to hallucinate.
48 hours to hallucinations.
Yeah.
The brain is so starved for the REM cycle that it just starts forcing dream states into your waking reality. It invents things that aren't there because it cannot sustain waking consciousness any longer.
It is a desperate biological override. And returning to the driving scenario we discussed at the very beginning, a sleep-deprived individual will obviously fall asleep much more quickly if they go to bed. But crucially, severely sleep-deprived individuals have immense difficulty staying awake the moment they stop actively moving.
Right. This is the concept of microsleeps. If you are sitting still watching television or staring at a long, straight highway where you barely have to move the steering wheel, your brain recognizes the physical inactivity and violently pulls the plug.
It is not a conscious choice to daydream. It is the brain forcing a shutdown for its own survival. That is why operating any machinery while carrying a heavy sleep debt puts you and everyone around you at extreme, unpredictable risk.
Because it's out of your control.
Completely. The continuum of consciousness will pull you down into sleep whether you consent to it or not.
This whole deep dive is a massive reality check about how fragile our waking awareness actually is. Let's recap the journey we've taken through section 4.1. We established that consciousness isn't a light switch. It is a delicate biological continuum.
Right.
We explored how this continuum is governed by a master clock, the SCN in our hypothalamus, which uses the light hitting our retinas to tell our pineal gland to release melatonin.
And we mapped out how manipulating that clock, whether through the trauma of jet lag, the perpetual disruption of shift work, or just the chronic late-night glow of artificial screens, forces us to accumulate a toxic sleep debt.
A debt that triggers obesity, shreds our immune systems, and impairs our brains worse than legal intoxication.
Exactly.
It fundamentally changes how I view staying up late to watch one more episode. And it leaves me with one final provocative thought to leave with you, the listener. We've learned that our fundamental biological hardware, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, the retinal light meters, our melatonin production is incredibly ancient.
Ancient, yes.
It is hardwired to be perfectly synchronized with the rise and fall of the sun. Yet our modern society relentlessly demands 24/7 productivity, rotating shifts, and surrounds us with inescapable artificial light.
A profound evolutionary mismatch.
Exactly. Are we essentially forcing our consciousness to exist in an environment it was never evolved to survive? Something to mull over tonight right before you reach over and finally turn off the light switch?